Hey, welcome back, guys. So we're about a week removed from the Power Ghost series finale, and in that time, I've had a chance to rewatch all 10 episodes back to back. So in today's video, we're going to go through the major plot points that were left open due to time constraints and abrupt cancellation, and most critically, the writer's strike. Something that cast a bit of a dark shadow over this sprawling narrative. Costing is something that has been praised for in every season up to this point, and that is cohesiveness in the story. Before we begin, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and bell notification to immediately receive these videos. Also, big thank you to all of my channel donors. If you'd like to be the next one, drop $1 on that Cash App for us. And lastly, a spoiler alert is now in effect for all things Power. Here we go. So I guess I'll take this critique back to the very beginning. Because from episode 1 to episode 10, it seems like the series kind of lost its way. And not necessarily just from like an action standpoint, as you can have a good story without action being like the focal point, but just from a perspective of connectedness. Our story starts out with Tariq on a revenge tour. In one of the more action-packed episodes of the season, we see him and Brayden exacting their revenge while simultaneously strategically maneuvering in order to dodge pitfalls and preserve their own lives. This resulted in them killing a federal agent, Agent Young, who was not only the nephew of Angela Valdez, but also Paz's only son. Tariq is forced to kill Agent Young when he gets a little bit too close to catching him thanks to the jump drive left behind by Cooper Sachs. And upon doing so, we're introduced to Detective Carter, who vows to avenge the death of Agent Young for one of his sisters in the faith, Paz Valdez. Now this is supposed to be the whole point of Carter's introduction into this season. He's an enforcer of law whose earliest objective is to nail Tariq St. Patrick due to his major crime against Paz, and every ancillary crime involved as well. However, as the season progresses on, we see Carter's main objective shift into not necessarily catching Tariq, but into controlling him due to him being exposed as a dirty cop himself. This ruptured the main storyline of the season and killed the cat and mouse nature that Power has been known for up to this point. It's always been criminals and has always been law enforcers trying to catch those criminals and even breaking certain lines and mandates in order to do so, kind of blurring the lines and making them ambiguous figures between the law and the underworld themselves. Never have we seen a law enforcer all out go directly to the dark side, unless you want to argue Angela Valdez, whose proximity to James made it inevitable. And even when we had Mike Sandoval back in the OG Power series, he was really a criminal playing as a law enforcer. He didn't have a grandiose idea in his head that he was doing something for the greater good in order to tame crime. He was an all-out criminal who was an extension of Lobos in a federal environment. Carter was a crusader for justice who, due to the loss of his wife and his inability to cope with that loss, decided to take the law into his own hands, which is an interesting story development so long as his original crusade is kept intact. But when they introduced Carter as just another criminal with a badge, he completely lost sight of why he was there in the first place. And when you take in the whole season consecutively, it's very noticeable. And this part just isn't a Carter problem, but this is an issue for the entire season. They ran it in 2 halves because it's literally 2 halves of a season. The first 5 episodes are tried and true Power episodes. This is what the Ghost series is known for and has hung their hats on up to this point. The action, the story, even the introduction of the flashback segments, which bolstered Monet's narrative. These are the true Power episodes, and this is likely what they had done prior to the writing strike interruption, which most certainly factored into this. So trust and believe, this isn't merely just a hate video, but some of these blemishes are so omnipresent that they're just hard to ignore. Another thing I have to mention is this. What happened to 2-Bit's storyline? The only time we saw him this season is when Tariq stole his car back from him and then subsequently sold it in order to get back into the game, after deciding with Brayden that civilian life was just too ghetto and no money in America is truly no fun. Trust me. So we see him take his car back, we see 2-Bit briefly chase after him, and then that's it. Now, 2-Bit is a character that has been in Power Ghost since the first season, and they've teased the consequences of Tariq not paying him a certain amount of money in the absence of his father, Ghost, who had made a previous deal with 2-Bit. Now, perhaps from a writing standpoint, they figured they kind of dragged it out as much as they could, but it still seems like a lingering hole in the story, as if they forgot to tie it up the right way. Because once you steal 2-Bit's car, us knowing the type of thug that he truly is, that's just it? He's never gonna seek you out? He's never gonna seek retribution for such an action? He's just gonna take that? That's a hard sell, you know, and I just can't get with that. Especially to what 2-Bit has been built up to be. While we're on the subject of loose ends, there's another major one involving Congressman Tate, who even more so than 2-Bit, has been an absolute mainstay in the Power Ghost universe. Having lost out on the chance of his own series due to Starz budget cuts among other things, his story was integrated with Tariq's to a degree, and him even getting that congressman seat was due to the previous deal deals that he made with Tariq up to that point, including blackmailing an associate of the Westons, who was essentially in Tate's way. But this season, Kamal Tate, who is a great character, but wasn't as present in the Ghost universe as his brother, had more playing time than the congressman himself. We saw Kamal Tate in a few episodes, primarily because he inserted himself into Carter's task force, and was also the conduit to us finding out who Carter really was from an underworld perspective. But then, in true power-like fashion, Kamal was taken off the board, which is cool. I have no issues with that, because that's how it goes in the Powerverse. But upon Congressman Tate finding out, he's led to believe that it was the Russians instead of Carter. And worse yet, he never truly discovers the killer of his brother, something that this commentator just finds to be unforgivable. Tariq and the crew kind of flirt with the idea of telling him, but it's never confirmed that they went through with that. So the season ends with Tariq at the top of the game, and the congressman never knowing the true killer of his own brother. And while we're in episode 10, we may as well just get them all out the way. What kind of superpower does Kane have that he's able to evade the police and vanish into thin air? Now, I've never been one of these people to criticize power to this degree from a writing standpoint. I think there's a lot of things in power that leave a lot for the imagination to kind of consume. And that's cool. I have no issues with that. But come on, man. Kane can't just be in a police shootout, roll under a car, and then vanish into thin air unless he's cool with Doctor Strange or the Spot from Spider-Man's animated series or somebody like this. Kane has many gifts, but he is not a supernatural being. I just don't understand that. Another major plot hole of this season were all the reckless murders committed by Tariq and Braden. We saw Tariq take out Salim in his own home, and Braden do the same to Elle's drug dealer, Steve, both men taken out in their own places of residence. But no blowback for either of these murders. Sure, Felicia Lewis was taken out in her own home as well, and the concoction by Carter was warranted due to the nature of her occupation and proximity to his task force. But what about these other bodies? And if we're gonna go on a willy-nilly killing spree, why wasn't Elle added to such a list? She was an obvious loose end that could still come back to bite Braden in his novice ass. What about her fate? Salim was a character who I infamously hated throughout his tenure on the series, but he's also a character who was raised by white parents, and I can only imagine them coming home to their affluent neighborhood and finding their dead black son, and the grief that could accompany that. But to not have it connect to anything to Tariq's story, and remember, we have to remember how his story ended. Tariq is essentially now on top of the game, and a quote-unquote ghost in the machine. But that ghost committed a plethora of missteps that could potentially trail back to him. But it seemed like they wiped his slate clean to a degree. Which brings me to another issue with Tariq's character arc. In addition for not being held accountable for any of his reckless murders, Tariq never fully reconciles with his father's legacy or his own actions that brought an end to his life. It's something that's flirted with throughout the series, but he still maintains animosity towards him even at the twilight of his own solo outing. As recent as episode 403, he rebuffs Zion's comparison to him and the legendary Ghost Man. This is something that he has to confront, reconcile, and dare I say even embrace before considering to don his iconic name. He can't waltz around as Ghost without understanding who his father truly was and what he sacrificed to cement that name. This is likely where Tommy will come in and soften Rick's position on his father through the recounting of tales about their street origin. The vision that we see Tariq go through in episode 5 was supposed to bridge the gap between him and his father, at least on the surface, but nothing from that really correlates with the rest of the season's story, and this is just unlike Ghost to leave such a major development hanging in the balance. If the justification for it is that it made Tariq realize that he had to be the quote-unquote apex predator and on top of the game, then I'm with that. But that's only 50% of its meaning. There's some major things that took place in that vision, including Tariq actually having his son, being taken out by his baby mom's brother, and then later by his baby mother herself, the higher up that he climbed through the game. And then most tragically, he's confronted by his son in the form of himself while standing in his father's club and donning his father's suit. And as I originally analyzed again, this is him coming to terms with his true destiny to a degree. But what else of it? It seems more accelerated than normal, as in the final scene, we witness Tariq approaching Chinadu, who's Noma's brother and the true head of their operation, and makes some very bold claims in an effort to be his new distributor. And although Chinadu is apprehensive, he eventually capitulates, especially after Tariq outlines every level of how the operation will work, including his newfound ownership of the police through Detective Nico, and Davis's reclamation of his license, giving them a legal arm in case things get jammed up below. But what's interesting to this commentator is that Chinadu accepts this deal in the first place. He doesn't feel any revenge towards his sister's loss? We saw him and Noma in several disagreements, but does a disagreement with your sibling undo the love that's supposed to be there? It would seem that in the spirit of sense, someone connected to my sister's demise would have no place in my organization. And if I took a meeting with them, it's only because I've had a bullet for them. But then too, maybe Chenadu didn't know Tariq's proximity to Noma and only assumed that the Tejadas were behind her death, the people that he did know. So if that proves to be true, then I can take that. It just seemed a little far-fetched though, but it's not the only assumption that's made, because Carter's retribution and fate in the final analysis leaves many assumptions in the air, because we see him exposed and even arrested, but then the assumption comes into play where he's just going to spend time in jail because the police arrest him, and this takes away mightily from the process that lies in between, and that's a fair trial. And outside of someone like a Derek Chauvin, when have you seen the police truly turn against their own? It's a rare occasion when the legal system would actually put a cop in jail, even one with the crimes on his jacket such as Carter. What Carter has working against his favor is the fact that he crossed what they call the thin blue line and betrayed one of his own in the form of a cop. But even with that, to assume that the system would agree with that is just a very far stretch. So Carter's put in jail with no trial, and even if he's put in jail, which Drew outlines is the worst thing for a cop, and I agree with Drew, but we don't even get a flash of him getting any physical retribution while in prison. A quick shot of him getting maybe bludgeoned or beaten or something. For the crimes that he's committed and his insidious deeds this season isn't too much to ask for. It just seemed like that even with his arrest and his exposure amongst the group, Carter to a degree got off easy. How I saw his story going was Carter being exposed not just among Tariq and his collective, but being exposed before the world. And not the world as in the entire world, but New York City, being exposed in the press, which is something that Congressman Tate alluded to when he wasn't getting the answers he originally sought out in the case of his brother's death. Carter's name being besmirched through the press, and us seeing the response and reaction from that seemed to be a fate befitting of someone as evil as Carter. But again, maybe it's just me. The final point I want to address is this. We were given a scene where Effie was surprised by her mother, a character that we've never previously seen, pulling up on her daughter on campus. And they have one of the most toxic exchanges that we've ever seen. But in the grand scheme of the story, what was the point of that? It's a valid question to ask, and the only justification I can think of is due to the final line that Effie's mother states upon their going their separate ways, where she says, "There she goes. There goes the real Josephina. How is someone ever gonna love you?" Or something like that. It truly explained the coldness of Effie's character, why she's so self-indulged and narrow-minded in all her movements, and is bolstered by her later action in giving Kane that runaway money, something she'd been saving for herself, yet sacrificed for someone else. This is a solid connection between those two events. But outside of that, we really didn't learn anything more by Effie's mother being introduced. She didn't factor into the story in any major way, possibly tripping Effie up in some way, or being the bridge between Effie and a jail cell. Some concrete consequence to really justify her appearance at all, such as the case with Janet for the Tejadas. We can say that without the introduction of this new character, Monet's family may have been desecrated even further due to her vengeful feelings when discovering that Drew and Diana made an attempt on her life. Janet's character in this type of a scenario is necessary because she's adding value to the story, but Effie's mother doesn't add such value. She's literally just a flyby character, if you will, and dare I say forgettable. But these are just some of the lingering issues I had with the season from a plot hole standpoint. What are your thoughts on all of this? And what are some plot holes that you found that I may not have mentioned here or didn't expound on further? Be sure to drop me your opinions in the comments below. As always, I thank you for watching today's video. If you liked today's video, go ahead and drop $1 on that Cash App for us, hit the like button, share it with your friends who are Power fans, and subscribe for more content such as this. This is Rudy P. Magic of Rudy P. Magic Beats, and have a blessed one until the next one. Peace, y'all.